By 5:52 a.m. on August 3rd, the sky above Rudy Sata was already dark with smoke. But minutes earlier, the detonation signal to 550 pounds of mines buried under the Sata Bridge had gone silent. What should have been a guaranteed kill zone, instead left a fully loaded Russian convoy stalled over a trap that refused to trigger. Stay with me. Here's how it unfolded. This was no minor road. The Sata Bridge linked Russian supply routes from Klimovo, Zlinka, and Starub towards Sudza and Kursk. Its loss would choke a critical artery. But first, the mines themselves had refused to answer. So how does half a ton of explosives remain silent at the exact moment they're meant to change the battlefield? The bridge had been wired perfectly, yet at the decisive moment, the trigger went dead. Beneath its central supports, TM-62M anti-tank mines were stacked with care. 550 pounds arranged to shear out the span's core in one synchronized detonation. The design was airtight. Once fired, the column on top would have been erased in seconds. On the screens of the Ukrainian operators, the convoy rolled into position in flawless formation. Fuel trucks, ammunition loads, armored protection, all parked squarely inside a kill zone engineered to collapse steel and concrete in a single pulse. The signal was sent. The transmitter fired. But from the bridge came no explosion. Only the stalled growl of engines idling overhead. The failure wasn't in wiring or detonators. The charges themselves were live. The fault lay in the electromagnetic layer of the battlefield. At the center of the Russian convoy moved the RB-341 VLER-3, a mobile electronic warfare system mounted on a heavy truck chassis. Its purpose was straightforward: flood the airwaves. It pushed out wideband interference across 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz, the same bands used by drones and by the remote triggers wired to the buried mines. When the Ukrainians pressed their switch, the command pulse never reached its target. The jammer swallowed it whole. Without that initiator, the explosives were reduced to dead weight. You can think of them like a string of dominoes lined up but never touched. Hundreds of pounds of potential stayed locked inside metal casings, silent and inert, while the enemy unknowingly parked above. Precision and placement counted for nothing once the invisible curtain of electronic warfare sealed the mines off from their trigger. The ambush, perfect on paper, was neutralized by a single node of jamming power. For the Ukrainians watching remotely, the silence wasn't just technical, it was operational crisis. Hours of work under cover of night, the risk of hauling bulk explosives into exposed terrain, every calculation leading to this one strike, all of it was now blocked by noise that could not be seen or touched. On their feeds, they could see the prize, a convoy stacked with flammable cargo sitting exposed. Yet their detonator screens offered them nothing. In that pause, what had been a near-certain success shifted into uncertainty. They now had two choices: abandon the operation and protect their assets, or improvise with what little remained under their control. Here was the danger. The Russian electronic warfare crew hadn't fired a single shot, but they had already broken the ambush apart. The battlefield had become a test of adaptation in the face of electronic dominance. With the mines untouched, every passing second raised the risk that the convoy would move on, unharmed and free to continue supplying the front. The trap had failed to spring, but the opportunity still hovered within sight. With the mines live and the convoy perfectly positioned, what could the operators do when the airwaves were dead? The only platform still responding was the Odin 10 drone, built for reconnaissance, not destruction. In that moment, the surveillance drone became the only asset still talking to the operators, and the only tool left to act. Its design made the difference. Unlike radio-controlled systems that the Russian jammer smothered, the Odin 10 ran through a fiber optic tether. That thin cord, spooled out behind its frame, carried every command, every video frame, and every correction without touching the airwaves. It couldn't be jammed. The drone had been introduced for its ability to stream both daylight imagery and sharp thermal signatures directly to the screens. That reliability meant operators could study the convoy down to the heat flare of a fuel tank. It was built to observe, not attack, but now it was the only channel of control alive. Normally, the job of the Odin was simple. It floated above terrain, located movement, counted vehicles, and confirmed what cargo they hauled. Its cameras stripped away camouflage, distinguishing fuel haulers from ammunition trucks. On the Sata Bridge, its role had been to watch and confirm the kill zone was full before detonation. But with the switch smothered by electronic warfare, that mission collapsed. Suddenly, the unarmed scout had to become the instrument of contact. The operators could see everything through its lens. Convoys glowing on thermal screens, central supports lined with strapped explosive charges, the river glinting below. From their perspective, the trap was real, but mute. The convoy idled at the exact point of maximum vulnerability, and each passing moment threatened to erase the chance. They knew the mines were live. They knew the geometry of the blast zone. All they lacked was a spark. Inside the control point, the choice hardened. They could abandon the strike or drive the Odin into the structure itself to force the detonation. It was not designed for impact. Its carbon frame was light, its rotors fragile. There was no shaped warhead attached, no secondary explosives to guarantee effect. The gamble was brutal in its simplicity. Slam the drone into the mine cluster and hope the physical shock chain reacted into ignition. Operators measured the risks. The fiber optic line could snap before contact, cutting their view and control. And even if the drone struck clean, the mines might remain inert. That twin set of risks defined the decision. Lose the drone and trigger nothing, or gamble it into the underside of the bridge. Anything less meant letting the convoy roll untouched across a span packed with fruitless charges. So they prepared the strike. The Odin 10 dipped off its overwatch line and traced low along the water. Its feed blurred with vibration as the camera tried to steady. A shake of motion, then the ghostly shapes of explosives strapped against steel appeared again. Operators breathed through the violence of the image, holding course under the central frame. The tether held tight, streaming every second in real time. In that instant, doctrine meant nothing. On paper, the Odin was supposed to be the Brigade's eyes, armored against jamming by design, but never tasked to physically touch the fight. Yet war often strips tools down to what they can do in the moment, not what they were built for. The surveillance drone, by necessity, was about to become the detonator. The order finalized. Command shifted from observation to assault. The operators adjusted heading, took the drone offline from its shadow watch, and leveled it on the pillar buried in explosives. The screen shook again. The tether stretched behind like a lifeline. Ahead waited the steel skeleton of a bridge primed to erupt. Then came the last maneuver, the dive toward contact. When impact came, the quiet gave way to violence. The Odin 10 struck the underside of the central support, shattering on contact and snapping its tether. That collision wasn't part of the plan, but it became the fuse. In that instant, the drone shifted from observer to detonator, setting off one of the densest mine charges laid during the war. Strapped tightly to the pillar were 25 TM62M anti-tank mines, a design carrying blocks of TNT able to kill armor with a single strike. One mine alone could shred a vehicle. Together, aligned along steel supports, they amplified one another. Reports describe it as a single violent chain reaction, an almost simultaneous ignition sparked by the shock of the crash. It moved like falling dominoes, each blast feeding the next, until the combined force erupted straight through the bridge's spine. The effect above was immediate. Asphalt ripped in slabs, steel bent upward. Vehicles directly overhead absorbed the first shockwave head-on. A fuel truck split open, spraying ignited liquid across the deck. Flames raced outward, coating the span in fire. Next came the ammunition carriers. Small caliber rounds began to cook off in bursts. Then stockpiled shells followed, tearing in uncontrolled volleys. Each secondary blast added energy back into the kill zone, compounding the destruction in waves. Reports from the aftermath said temperatures soared high enough to melt armor and buckle steel, described as hotter than 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit at the core. Concrete fractured from within, bursting apart under stress. Load-bearing slabs tore loose, each collapse dragging the next. What began as a single detonation quickly turned into a rolling structural failure. For the crews inside their vehicles, no defense mattered. Blast pressure exceeded what human bodies could endure. The lead BTR-82A, built to withstand standard mines, was hurled off the roadway by the shockwave. At the rear, trucks were struck by both heat and impact. Some shoved into one another before plunging into fire below. The convoy had been shielded minutes earlier under electronic cover, but now it was trapped in a burning wreckage with no path forward and no chance of escape. The bridge itself followed. Once the core column failed, forces shifted sideways and tore the rest apart. Support beams twisted until they gave way. Deck panels lifted, then folded into the river. Steel cables snapped under strain. Each fracture accelerated collapse until the span could no longer hold its own weight. Fuel continued leaking into the water, flames spreading downstream until the river's surface looked as if it had caught fire. From a tactical perspective, the strike did more than kill a convoy. It demolished the Sata Bridge itself, a vital artery feeding Russian supply lines into Sudza and onward toward Kursk. In one explosion, what had been a protected logistics corridor was erased. Supplies, replacements, and armored support, meant to reinforce the front, were cut off at their midpoint. The collapse was not only physical, it was operational, forcing Russian units to reroute, delay, and absorb the loss. None of this aligned with the original plan. The attack had been designed for remote detonation, clean timing, and controlled execution. Instead, what unfolded was an improvised chain of decisions made under pressure. Yet, the outcome exceeded what planners had drawn on maps. Bridge gone, convoy destroyed, and logistics disrupted. The blast left a scar across both the river and the Russian campaign. But the deeper point wasn't just the fire or the collapse. The real weight of this night was found in the split-second decision that made it possible, and what that decision says about survival in modern warfare. Improvisation as a weapon in modern war was not theory on that night. It was fact. The carefully drawn plan had collapsed the moment Russian electronic warfare jammed the detonator link. The bridge was wired, the convoy was in place, and the switch was pressed, but nothing fired. Electronic disruption had stripped away every advantage Ukraine's 58th Brigade thought they had earned. What followed was the pivot. Instead of abandoning the mission, operators turned the Odin 10 from observer into hammer. A surveillance drone became a detonator. That single choice produced the chain reaction that destroyed the convoy, collapsed the bridge, and ignited the river below. Improvisation, not the original plan, delivered the decisive effect. The consequences ran beyond fire and steel. Russian supply lines into the Sudza corridor and onward toward Kursk were suddenly narrowed. Every lost tanker meant less fuel reaching the front. Every destroyed ammunition, load, meant thinner stockpiles in the depots. Analysts noted that reducing throughput at choke points like the Sata Bridge doesn't only delay deliveries, It can create temporary openings for infantry to advance while the enemy scrambles to reroute logistics. In other words, adaptation had both tactical and operational impact. This wasn't new in the history of warfare. Time and again, units bound to rigid doctrine crumbled when their plans broke contact with reality. By contrast, smaller forces that bent under pressure often found unexpected edges. The Sata ambush showed that pattern in real time. The careful preparation may have set the stage, but the real result came from refusing to let the script dictate the outcome. Think of it like chess. Ukraine gave up their drone's reconnaissance role as if sacrificing a queen. On paper, a devastating loss. Yet the exchange exposed the convoy's position and forced its collapse. A sacrifice that at first looked desperate became the move that decided the match. For Russia, this offered a warning. Their electronic warfare advantage was meant to shut down ambushes and level the field. Instead, it triggered the very improvisation that demolished their convoy. The advantage flipped in the span of a few minutes. What they designed to suppress attacks ended up inviting one they could not stop. For Ukraine, the lesson ran deeper. The most valuable trait on a battlefield shaped by drones, jammers, and rapid firepower isn't always superior hardware. It's the ability to solve problems at the edge of failure with what's left at hand. Rigid planning can't survive when signals vanish, but quick adaptation can turn that silence into an opportunity. And that is why the Sata Bridge matters. The night proved that firepower alone won't guarantee dominance. What carried weight was the team's decision to adapt under stress, and in doing so shift the balance on a critical supply line. The episode stands as a clear example of how adaptation can outweigh raw tonnage. In a fight where signals can be silenced, who has the advantage? The biggest arsenal or the quickest mind? That question doesn't just frame what happened at Sata. It points forward toward battlefields where agility may count more than mass, and where thinking faster than the opponent can be the edge that decides wars. Still watching? Then you already sense where this is heading. Wars today are not won by flawless blueprints, but by quick minds under pressure. The Sata Bridge ambush proved it. When electronic warfare silenced the detonators, a surveillance drone became the detonator instead. That shift wasn't planned, but it delivered results. The convoy destroyed, the bridge collapsed, and the 58th Brigade reporting mission complete. Ingenuity outmaneuvered technology designed to dominate the spectrum. If this analysis matters to you, like and subscribe. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and why you think adaptability matters in war. Share this with anyone following military tech. The question is, who adapts first?